Welcome back to the Double Leg. I'm one half of the show, Hey Jai Picks. The other half of the show, the Parlay, joining me in to break down some UFC Edmonton. But before we do that, let's talk about last weekend's card, UFC 308. Ilia Topuria getting it done like we said so on this show. We made it very clear Ilia Topuria was going to win that fight. Khamzat Chimaev picking up a big win as well. A lot of big fights went down. How'd it go for you as far as a betting perspective?
Yeah, man, I was up on the night. I was cruising, and then the last two fights came in. I didn't have anything on Ilia because the line, but I had the over rounds, and I thought after we got through the first two rounds, that over 3.5 was going to cash. I had the over 2.5 and Khamzat Whitaker. I thought Whitaker would probably get dominated for the first half of the fight, but I thought he'd survive. Use that veteran experience, and the jaw did not hold up. So that was a 6-unit swing for me. Ended up going down minus 2.48 units. So it would have been a great night with just one or even two of those plays hitting, but they didn't. Other than that, we hit some good plays on the card too. Nothing crazy on this card. I tried to keep it really nice and simple. I didn't see a lot of spots that really stood out besides Abus Magomedov. Hit that for 3.5 units. Everything else was just 1-2 unit plays that hit here and there. So yeah, disappointing ending. Fun fight to watch though. How about you?
Yeah, I was on the two overs in the main and co-main, and I think we just got to tip our hat, man. To knock out a guy that's never been knocked out, you got to just tip your cap and be like, damn, Ilia is truly that dude. And then Khamzat obviously breaking Whitaker's jaw. And we knew if Khamzat was going to win, it was probably going to be early on. And Whitaker looked like he was doing all the right things, but one thing went wrong and he had to tap. So you tip your cap there, you lose on the overs. I still feel like I still feel good about it. I don't think those are the worst bets. The one bad bet I did have was Bruno Silva, and Bruno Silva did not show up. I expected him to. He's on a losing streak. Maybe he had to fight for his job, but I guess he's just going to take the way out. Overall, I was down 0.23 units, so a very small loss on the straight bets and the parlays, and then the DFS plays got cooked by the boy Rafael Cerquera, who just shelled up because I had a couple overs on significant strikes in that fight. I thought Cerquera was going to be able to move around the outside, but I didn't think he was going to shell up against the cage. That fight lasted less than a minute, so that screwed about 3 plays for me. We lost 3 units there. So a slight losing night, but overall on the year, still up 96 units on the year for me. So we'll try to hit that 100 mark this week with UFC Edmonton. We got a pretty solid card to break down here. I think we got 14 fights, so it's loaded up with matchups. Main event, Brandon Moreno, Amir Albazi. Co-main is a 5-rounder between Aaron Blanchfield and Rose Namajunas. A couple other solid fights on the card. Lots of Canadians. I don't know if it's the highest level fight card because we got a ton of Canadians. And last time we were in Canada, the Canadian men got full swept. So hopefully they come with a vengeance and try to make MMA in Canada actually something to be respected. But got anything else before we jump into this breakdown?
Some of those same Canadians are on this card.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful. Hey, I feel like there was a card before that. Like the Canadian fighters went like 0-8. Am I tripping? Maybe
no,
like 6 months before that?
The card before that, the year before that, all of them won.
All of them won. Okay. I knew there was a sweep one way or the other, but
I think it was like 6-0 on I think that was UFC 289, I want to say. With Nunes and Aldana. It was a pay-per-view.
Okay.
They went 6-0 and a lot of underdogs, but the last one they went like 0-8 or something like that. So we'll see if they're hot or cold this week, but let's jump into it. First fight of the night, we got Jack Shore taking on Youssef Zalal. Zalal coming in as the favorite at -240. Jack Shore comes back at +215. If you know the show, if you know me, I'm not a Jack Shore guy, never been. I think he was so overhyped when he was undefeated. He's a Cage Warriors guy. If you know me, I love to fade me a Cage Warriors guy just because I think the prospects that usually come out of there are very overhyped. Some of them are very good, but a lot of them are pretty bad. Jack Shore picked up a bunch of wins. Eventually, he ran into Ricky Simone. He takes a loss. He comes back, gets another layup in Makwan Amirkhani, gets a finish there, and then last time out against Joe Anderson Brito, loaded up on Brito. He gets it done with that leg kick. I guess just hole in his leg. Dr. Stoppage. Here he is. Underdog against Yusuf Zalal, who's on a nice little tear. Second run in the UFC, picked up back-to-back subs. I like what I'm seeing from Yusuf Zalal. I think this is a pretty solid matchup where he could pick up another win. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he can too. He kind of caught a lot of flack for going 0-4 on that 0-4 run in the UFC and then leaving the UFC. But I mean, if you look at I guess 0-3-1, he had the draw to Damon Blackshear. But if you look at those fights, man, Blackshear has had success outside of his last fight. He outstruck him by a mile, 63-27. He outstruck Sean Woodson slightly, had a couple of takedowns, loses a split decision. Sean Woodson does nothing but win in the UFC. And then the other fight, Sung Woo Choi, not the best fight, but then he's losing to Ilia Topuria, who we just saw, become legendary just last Saturday. So this guy's fought high level of competition. He is very well-rounded, and he's shown that with his bounce back into the UFC. The striking early looked really good against Billy Quarantillo, was lighting him up. Landed the takedowns, a couple of them, and then the second takedown, that's all he needed. And he found the submission. Same with Jarno Aarons. The first takedown he landed, he ends up getting to the back, rear naked choke, finishes him too. He's just showing, man, he's going to be super tough to beat since his game's evolved, like into a full mixed martial arts game. Like if Jack Shore comes out here and wants to stand with him, I think he gets picked apart for 15 minutes. If Jack Shore wants to wrestle with him, I mean, Zalal's probably going to be completely open to that too. And I actually think Zalal, is slightly slicker with the jiu-jitsu on the ground. So, yeah, I think anywhere this fight goes might be closer on the ground than it is on the feet, but I think Zalal is going to have a slight edge. Minus 240, not super interested in it right now. Maybe a parlay piece. I still don't like parlaying fighters that are that big a favorites. But, yeah, man, I think Yusuf Zalal should get it done. He's going to be my pick here.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Yusuf Zalal. I do like what I've seen from him, but I'm really picking him because I just don't think Jack Shore is that good. The guy literally has 0 wins over active UFC fighters. That's, his 5-0 run he had in the UFC was against absolute bums. The only time he's ever lost is when he faces an actually decent fighter. And I think Yusuf Zalal is a decent fighter. Minus 240. I don't know, because Jack Shore has a good all-around game, but I just don't think he's dangerous on the feet. He's submitting low-level guys. I just don't think he was a bantamweight. He's a fat
weight bullying those dudes.
Yeah, and he wasn't even like shredded. He's 5'8". He's not even that big of a bantamweight. Moves up to 145. I think he's gonna get, big brother by a lot of these guys. He got big brother by Brito. I think Yusuf Zalal could throw him around too, maybe find a submission. So give me Yusuf Zalal for the pick. He gets it done, and Jack Shore takes another L. Moving on. We got Jamie Lynn Horth taking on Ivana Petrovic. Petrovic comes in as the underdog, and the first Canadian we'll talk about, women's MMA. Canadian, 34 years old, comes in at minus 215. She's coming off the loss earlier this year to Veronica Hardy. Petrovic picked up her first UFC win against Na Liang. If you don't beat Na Liang, you ain't going to be a UFC fighter. So she finally, solidified herself there, picking up a win. I think it was a round 3 rear naked choke or a TKO, I forget. But, Na Liang ain't got nothing in the tank after about 5 or 7.5 minutes. And that's all you got to do. It's a weird one for me because I'm not really high on either fighter. And I don't think Jamie Lynn Horth is really minus 215 against a lot of people. But I do think she's probably more physical. I don't think Petrovic has, the greatest striking. I think the physicality might be a little bit too much for her in this one, just because I think both girls probably want to get the fight to the ground. So I'm kind of leaning Horth, but do you see anything on the dog?
Originally, I was kind of thinking maybe a dog shot here. But yeah, like you alluded to, man, the physicality is a big thing. Jamie Lynn Horth might not be the most talented fighter in the division. Striking, she's not the fastest, but she's really big for 125, in my opinion. She's, gonna be an inch shorter than Petrovic, and she's gonna have a reach disadvantage. But man, she's super strong in there. She's not real easy to take down and hold there. I think Petrovic's gonna have to rely on putting her against the cage, working in takedowns, because on the feet, I just think Petrovic is a tad slow. Like she'll land a decent left hand every now and then, like she landed on Luana Carolina a couple of times. But her striking is just not high enough level to go out there and win a 15-minute striking match. I think she's going to have to rely on the takedowns here and I just don't know if she's going to be strong enough to do it repeatedly. I think Jamie Lynn Horth up against the cage is going to be just as good and as strong as her. And really, I think that's where Petrovic has to win the fight. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think Jamie Lynn Horth wins minus 215 on women's MMA at this level, though. Not interested whatsoever.
Yeah, I wouldn't be betting Jamie Lynn Horth, just considering both of her fights in the UFC have been very close. She could have easily lost that to Haley Cowan in her debut. I know it was a unanimous decision, but that third round was the decider, and I think it could have went either way. Petrovic, we faded her in her debut. That was the dog of the week, the double A of the week. Luana Carolina at plus 200. Wish we could get that that here, but we're not gonna get it. I think Jamie Lynn Horth probably squeaks one out here. Not betting her, but she'll be the pick. Moving on, we got Chad Anheliger taking on Cody Gibson. Battle of the old men. We got another Canadian here now, Anheliger. Anheliger is just he's a smaller bantamweight, man. He's 5'6". He's taking on the 5'10" Cody Gibson. He'll have a 7-inch reach disadvantage, but he is the dog at plus 162, the hometown guy. What do you got?
Yeah, I think the size of Anheliger scares me off of him at times. I mean, I remember when he fought Gregorio in his last fight. I took him. He's like plus 165 or something. I took him for like 0.75 units when it should have been a hammer spot, just knowing what we know now. But it was the size, man, because Charles Lampos, big guy, really physically strong, and I figured it was going to cause him problems. But the one thing Anheliger does really well and gives people problems with is obviously the footwork, the speed. He's not a guy that's going to go out there and get a bunch of knockouts by any means. He doesn't hit that hard, but he throws a lot of volume. And when he gets in his flow state, he can kind of be a lot to deal with. For Cody Gibson, I mean, for him in this fight, I think he's just going to come out here. He probably could match Anheliger with the volume. He's another guy that's not going to get many knockouts whatsoever. And he's going to have to grapple Anheliger. Now, if looking past Cody Gibson's last win against Kelleher, this guy was struggling, man. Loses to Miles Johns, Brad Katona, Douglas Silva de Andrade. Decent middle of the road type of guys, not the highest level. I don't necessarily think Anheliger is a guy who's going to make much noise in this division anytime. I think he's going to be an up and down guy as well. But the one thing I kind of like here is how scrambly he is on the ground. He's not easy to sit and control. And I think that's what Cody Gibson's going to have to do to win this fight. Because Cody's striking is not bad on the feet. It's just not where he's going to win a ton of fights, in my opinion. And I think Anheliger, with the movement, he's going to look better, probably land more often in this spot. If he can just stuff the takedowns, plus 162, he's used to cashing in that spot. I'm going to take him for the pick for the upset here. I don't know, man. Cody Gibson, I'm just not big on him. Been around around the sport a while at least. I'm not sure. How old is he now? He's got to be 36, 37?
37.
37? Yeah, man. I'm going to go with Anheliger here. I just think like I said, the volume, the movement is going to give him problems in this spot.
I'm going to go Cody Gibson just based on the fact that I think Anheliger, he's just too small. Like, I do like his movement from the outside. He's in and out. He's got good cardio, but his takedown defense isn't very good. And his submission defense isn't very good. He's been submitted like 6 times in his career. Now, a lot of those were early on in his career, and he hasn't been submitted for a long time until he got subbed by Jose Johnson. But I think Cody Gibson has some pretty solid jiu-jitsu, I think, from the outside, even with the movement. I think Cody's just much longer. He'll be able to use those weapons. And you look at his losses. I mean, he had a really close fight with Brad Katona, and it lost to Miles Johns. That's since coming back to the UFC. That's not that bad. But Chad Anheliger's losing to Alatang Lee. Jose Johnson really isn't that great of a fighter either. So I'm going to go with Cody Gibson for the pick. I don't love it at minus 210, but I think he's the rightful favorite. And I think he picks up a win here. But that sub prop might be calling my name once I see the line on it, just because I was on Jose Johnson by sub against Anheliger. He cashed it with like 18 seconds left. I know it's going to be there. And Cody Gibson coming off a submission win, so it probably won't get that great of a price, but I'll be looking at it for sure. Cody Gibson is the pick. Moving on, we got Sidey taking on Garrett Armfield. Armfield comes in as the underdog. Sidey comes in at minus 174. Even after the loss earlier this year on the last Canadian card. Interesting fight because Armfield has been kind of hot and cold. Like he had a great win over Toshiomi Kazama, where he knocked him out pretty clean, and then another good win against Brad Katona, and then he takes a dump against Brady Heastand, has him almost knocked out, and then just kind of gasses out, gets weathered down, and gets submitted in the third round. So he's 2-2 in the UFC, more UFC experience. Surrey City, only one fight, one loss, and it was to another boxer type. Garrett Armfield's more of a boxer, and this is a kind of a similar matchup in my opinion. It was a very close fight, but Tavares definitely landed the better shots. Surrey City was just kind of pressuring him, but then he would get cracked with some big ones. Chin didn't look the best, but the will to stand in there was there, and the cardio was there. Kind of surprised to see him as a favorite here. What do you think?
Yeah, I was a little bit too, especially from like a higher level experience standpoint. Armfield's been in there with good fighters. I mean, he's made his debut against David Onama, who is a super dangerous fighter. He's been in there with Brad Katona, who's fought for a long time at a higher level. And then his last fight against Brady Heastand, he had a ton of success in that fight. I just don't think he expected Heastand to be able to weather some of the storms he brought. Like, he knocked him down in that fight. He landed a ton of big shots. I just don't know if he expected Heastand to kind of weather it and land that many takedowns down the stretch and kind of control him. I think Siri City is a decent grappler. He's a guy that I think has kind of fallen in love with the striking. I think that's what we're primarily going to see him at, or see him use in the UFC. I mean, you watch him against Ramon Tavares. Tavares is a slick boxer. The guy hits like a truck as well. And they just kind of had an all-out war back and forth that was very tight. Now, if he gets into that kind of exchange with Garrett Armfield, we've seen Siri City drop before. We've seen Garrett Armfield drop people before. I think that kind of favors Garrett Armfield, especially if the fight gets into the pocket. The one thing I worry about, I guess, on Armfield's side is that Siri City has shown the ability to kind of dog it out and go a full 15 minutes. We saw Garrett Armfield get extremely tired in his last fight. And, if Siri City decides I'm going to get this win anyway, shape or form, I think he could implement a little bit of the wrestling towards the end of the fight when he's the fresher fighter too, to steal some minutes. So that's what would worry me. I just feel like Armfield, with the power in his hands, I think early in the fight he could give Siri City some problems because Garrett can come out hot, man. When he comes out hot, land some bombs, he can get some finishes at this level. Oh man, it's tough though. Like I'll take the dog. Screw it. I was gonna side with City being in the front of his home crowd in Canada, but I'll take the dog. But I think if you're betting on this, would you think that money's going to come in on Siri City as the week goes on, being the home crowd fighter, all that stuff?
I don't know because last week I kind of expected some money to come in on Whitaker and Holloway, but it didn't ever really come in. So I don't know. I think Arfield should honestly be the favorite here. When I was looking at this matchup, I usually like to look at the matchups and kind of put out a line before I look at the odds. And I thought Armfield would be like minus 150, just considering the UFC experience, and just considering I think he's the better striker. I think the only disadvantage here is the ground game and the cardio. But I think Garrett Armfield's ground game is good early. It's just like later in the fights, he tends to slow down and then kind of make some mistakes. So I'm going to pick Garrett Armfield. I might bet on him. Maybe try to look for a prop or something. But I think he's the much better striker. And I just hope he doesn't gas out and give up his neck. But I think he'll probably be in control a lot of this fight. I know he's smaller, but the reach advantage isn't too big for Sarhi City. And Sari's not a guy that really uses his length all that well. He's just kind of a pressure guy. And if Garrett can match it and sit in the pocket, I think he's just better there. So I'm going to go with Garrett.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch some of the fights where Garrett gets a little tired too, I mean, it's when guys are trying to press him against the cage and take him down, and he's got to defend and exert that energy. I think in a 15-minute striking match, I think the cardio would hold up a little better.
All right, let's move on to the big boys. Alexander Romanov taking on Rodrigo Nascimento. Big boy Romy sitting at plus 114 right now, and big tits Nascimento coming in at minus 146. These are the matchups we live for right here. Just a couple of big boys going in there and looking to either take the fight to the ground or maybe last longer than 5 minutes. We'll see. What do you think about this one?
Dude, I cannot stand Romanov. I don't know. It's just looking at him like the guy had so much potential when he came into the UFC, rattled off 5 wins in a row. Was submitting guys, knocking them out, and then it's like he just decided not to work out and not to train leading up to that Marcin Tybura fight. I think he thought he was going to walk through him, and he had a lot of success early and then just completely got dominated second half of the fight. And then they feed him Volkov, which, I mean, Volkov's a very high-level heavyweight. He's an in-shape guy, and just completely beat the brakes off him for the first however long it lasted, 2 or 3 minutes. I don't think Romanov landed a single significant strike in that fight. They give him Blahoy Ivanov, who poses 0 to basically no threat whatsoever. He's just going to look to out-tap you to a decision, and he was able to win that fight. Didn't really have to exert too much energy. Landed some takedowns, got control time, just laid on him. And then he gets Jailton Almeida submitted in the first couple minutes once again. Like, this guy comes in here, and he hasn't looked in shape for a while. Even that win against Blahoy Ivanov, like, he was tired in the fight. He didn't look physically better than he had in those losses. But the thing about with Rodrigo Nascimento is if Romanov comes out here with the wrestling heavy game plan, which I think he has to do in order to get an early win, I mean, Nascimento is good enough on the ground. I don't think he's going to get submitted. I don't think he's going to get controlled all that easily. And once it gets back to the feet after one grappling exchange, I think Romanov's a sitting duck. I think Nascimento's striking is good enough. He's going to be able to find the chin of this guy. I mean, Nascimento against Derek Lewis was having some pretty good moments in that fight, and then just kind of got a little tired in the 3rd round and then took a big shot, and the fight was over. It's just a different level here. I mean, I think Romanov kind of sucks at this point in his career. So I'm taking Nascimento. I don't even know if he's going to be able to stuff the first takedown. I mean, he's got 76% takedown defense, but I don't think he's going to get submitted either, or even ground and pounded. I think Romanov's going to gas out like he always does, first 2 to 3 minutes, and then Nascimento is going to eventually find a big shot and put him out or submit him.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this is just lower level. I know they're ranked, but it's just such a low level matchup because I don't think Nascimento's very good, and I don't.
Hey, he beat D1 Dontel May, so
yeah, I think Dontel sucks.
I know.
Beat him twice actually, so
Yeah.
there's a feather in his cap. Yeah, I don't know. I'm actually kind of leaning towards Romanov, because I think he can get Nascimento down early. I mean, the guy's taken down most people that he's ever wanted to. He should have took down Volkov. Volkov grabbed the cage. That was pretty blatant. And then he just kind of gave up. But we all know how he looked going into that fight, where it was clear the guy just didn't care. I'll never forget him being a minus 2,200 favorite. It's Jay Sherman. That's just crazy to think about. He goes from minus 2,200 to losing his next fight. But I mean, man, he's losing to Tybura, Volkov, Almeida. Like, Nascimento would lose to those guys too. And honestly, I look back at the Rogerio de Lima fight. I'm like, why can't he do that to Nascimento? Like, Rogerio de Lima's not bad. Romanov picked him up and put him down and forearm choked him. I think in the first round, he's super live. I would probably, if I was going to play him, I would definitely try to play him in round 1, or maybe look at Nascimento live after round 2. Because Nascimento has decent cardio. Obviously, it's probably going to be better than Romanov. But Romanov's game actually hasn't been terrible later into these fights. Like, he gassed out against Tybura badly. That was at elevation. And then we haven't really seen him outside of the Blagoy Ivanov fight into second and third round. And he actually looked pretty decent in the second and third round against Blagoy. So I think I'm going to go with the dog here in a greasy heavyweight fight where I'm going to chalk it up to the dog, who I think is probably the better or more dangerous guy in round 1. That's for sure. So give me Romanov.
Dude, if I'm Nascimento, honestly, I'm coming across the cage and I'm shooting the first takedown on this dude.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if you give him adversity early, I think he's going to crack. But
I mean, he's got a 28% takedown defense. I mean, the guys that have taken him down easily. most of the guys he's fighting, like outside of that, Volkov not going to be shooting takedowns. Tybura wanted to fight on the feet, you know what I'm saying? But if Rodrigo Nascimento just lands that one in the first round, I think the fight's over. I don't think he's got anything left after being defeated in that one wrestling match right there.
How about this though? We saw Carlos lay out last week, right? We know Romanov ever since after that Chase Sherman fight, he must have lost his nutritionist or something. Maybe he gets that nutritionist back and we see him at weigh-ins and he just looks like he's in great form.
I was just going to say, this is a fight you cannot place a bet before weigh-ins.
Nah,
you just can't.
You got to watch him.
But I mean, because dude, you're going to know. You're going to know at weigh-ins which side you're on and you're going to want to hammer it.
If he's got acne all over his back, max bet Alexander Romanov round one.
But if he's got the hair like in his eyes and he looks like he's sweating just walking up to the scale, I think it's a 20-unit max bomb on Rodrigo Nascimento.
If he hasn't had a haircut in a good 4 or 5 months, then yeah, it's Nascimento.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Charles Jourdain taking on Victor Henry. Speaking of hair, look at Victor Henry.
I thought you were going to say, speaking of fighters who suck.
No. Henry coming in as a slight underdog. Charles Jourdain, slight favorite. So Jourdain moving down to 135 after getting knocked out by Jean Silva. I think that's probably a smart move. Once you feel that power at 145, I think that was his first knockout loss, which made it even more impressive that Jean Silva knocked him out. It moves down to 135. Smart, in my opinion. I think he was outmatched by a lot of guys at 145, just physicality-wise. But either way, I don't think he's getting an easy fight here against Victor Henry. And Victor Henry is a guy who's never been finished. He's got a lot of professional MMA experience. He's had some solid UFC performances. Good all-around fighter. I think Victor Henry is definitely alive here. What do you think?
No, I think he is too. I think Charles Jourdain got like so much love in the UFC and had like so many fans there for a while, and I was kind of confused why. Like this guy was never really on a win streak and never really had any great, amazing performances. And he's taken a ton of losses in the UFC, and he's on a 2-fight losing streak here. One where he ate 80 significant strikes from Sean Woodson, and then he ate 34 from Gene Silva, and that's like taking 300 in a night because Gene Silva throws everything he's got. And eventually, he was knocked out in that fight, taking some damage there. Now, Victor Henry, I think he's a well-rounded fighter. I think he's, pretty decent. It's just none of his wins have really been impressive either. The guy beat Rana Yaya, who's a dinosaur at this point, had the no contest with Javid, and then he beats Tony Gravely by split decision in a fight where he was taken down a couple of times, but on the feet, landed a ton of volume, looked really good. Lost to Rafael Asuncao, who I believe was 39 at the time. I believe so. And then beat Barcelos. Not even going to try to say his name tonight. So I don't know, man. None of the wins have been impressive. He does have good volume on the feet. I think his striking's pretty good. He can, hit decently hard, and if you start to get tired, he can really expose that. And Charles Jourdain's kind of the same way. Like, I think this is lined perfectly. I think this is a pick 'em. I'm not leaning really one way or the other here. I think, who's got more upside? Probably Victor Henry. He's got a lot of fight experience as well. I mean, he's got 30 professional fights. I don't think he's going to be outmatched anywhere in this spot. I'm going to take him for the pick just because I don't really like what I've seen out of Jourdain in his entire career, but especially taking all the damage he has late. So it's a tough one, though.
Yeah, I think I love Charles Jourdain just from like a fan, just because I think he's funny. He puts on some pretty fun fights, but I don't think he's the greatest fighter. And I'll never forget getting plus 175 on Sean Woodson.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, I was like, oh my God, we'll never see that again.
They made you sweat it though.
Yeah, they did. It was a split. It should not have been a split. And I guess that was probably the Canadians trying to get some home cooking there. So maybe we see some home cooking here on the Charles Jourdain side, but he's 2-6 when it comes to decisions. So, I mean, he's not a guy that really wins a ton of decisions. And considering Victor Henry's a guy that's never been finished, I think Victor Henry probably outvolumes him on the feet. Has 83% takedown defense. I think he probably wins this fight, honestly. I think the skill gap at 135 and 145 could come into play here as well. I don't love the age for Victor Henry. That's the only thing that's really holding me back is that he's 37, but he doesn't have a ton of UFC miles, which is nice to see. So I'm going to go with Victor Henry. I think he's just a better striker. I think he's got good enough takedown defense. I think he's got great cardio, obviously good durability. So I'm going to give Victor Henry a shot. I'll take him for a pick. Moving on, we got Ariane Lipski, also known as Ariane de Silva, taking on Jasmine Jasudavicius at minus 205. Jasmine has been the rising star from Canada, honestly. She's honestly one of the best Canadian fighters right now. She's coming in as the favorite against Lipski, who has had a nice little resurgence to her career. I know she is coming off a loss to Karine Silva, but she was on a nice little 3-fight winning streak. Couple upsets against Melissa Gatto and Casey O'Neill. A finish sprinkled in there. She got out physicaled by Karine Silva, held down and lost that decision, but Karine Silva's looked like a beast in the UFC. Jasmine coming off the win to Fatima Klein, where we got even money on Jasmine.
Yeah.
God, these lines we just think back on, you're like, oh my God. But you're not getting it here. Minus 205 in her home country. Who do you got?
Yeah. I tend to lean Jasmine getting it done just at this point. And, looking at Lipski's career, she's got a lot of miles for a women's MMA mixed martial artist in the UFC, taking some damage too. Like, that's the thing that's always concerned me about her going into fights is, like, if she gets in there with a decent striker, she could get touched up and, she could get knocked out. She took a bad knockout to Priscilla Cachoeira in a first round. She got knocked out by Montana De La Rosa and then knocked out by Antonina Shevchenko in the fight right before that.
What's
that?
Ground and pound finish. In both.
That one was, or I guess Antonina was too. But I mean, either way, the girl, when she gets in there with girls who can grapple with her and can stay safe from the submissions, she tends to give up moments off of her back. I think if Jasmine goes up there and puts her against the cage, I think she's going to be physically stronger than her. I think if she gets the takedowns and doesn't get submitted, I think she's going to rack up a bunch of control time. I don't see really Lipski working to get back to her feet. I see her throwing up triangles. I see her looking for those kind of submissions and ultimately just losing minutes in this spot. Not to say she can't get them, because she can. I mean, we saw against Casey O'Neill, she threw in a nasty, nasty submission. I think we were both on that play because we were both in the crowd that night. But yeah, I mean, if this thing stays on the feet, I think Lipski probably has the cleaner boxing, probably hits a little bit harder. But, it's just not really Jasmine's game to go out there and just have a striking match. She's going to mix it in. She's going to put her against the cage. That's what would make me scared. And then going to a judge's decision in Canada, where Jasmine is one of your biggest Canadian fighters on the roster, I just don't see it working out for Lipski. But Jasmine's going to be the pick. Don't really like minus 205 in any Jasmine fight because a lot of times they can play out pretty close. But, yeah, I'm going to take it for the pick.
Yeah, I'm going to take Jasmine for the pick as well, but I'll just say this. If Jasmine is on the feet, she's in trouble because her striking is not very good. No head movement, but she's just so damn tough. She'll just walk through it and eventually get to her spot on the cage where she'll clinch you up, take you down, and hold you there. She has really solid wrestling. For WMMA, she's probably one of the better wrestlers. She's very good at implementing just her physicality in there. She's a dog. She gets in that cage, she's a dog. So I think that'll win her a lot of fights. I think that'll probably win her this fight because Lipski has shown struggles in the past with getting taken down and getting beaten up there. I think she's shirted up a little bit. Against Karine Silva, she was landing her shots on the feet, but she would just give up the takedown and give up too much top control. She wouldn't take a ton of damage there, but I think Jasmine probably does get the takedowns, racks up the control time, and gets her hand raised by decision. So give me the Canadian to get it done here for the pick. But, like you said, minus 205, I'm not really too crazy about betting that. Moving on, we got Amin Zahabi taking on Pedro Munhoz. Munhoz comes in as the slight favorite. Zahabi comes back at plus 110. Another Canadian in Zahabi. Not a big age gap here. Pedro at 38, you're probably going to see a lot of big age gaps, but Zahabi's still 36. Zahabi coming off the big underdog win against Javed Basharat earlier this year, where he just dogged it out. He was the one that was throwing more, coming forward, and he got his hand raised. Munhoz, it's not been a good stretch for Pedro Munhoz. I mean, he's won one fight in the last 3 years, and he's lost 4 of them. But you got to look at the level of competition. It's Jose Aldo, Dominic Cruz, Chito Vera, and Kyler Phillips. One win over Chris Gutierrez, who at the time was a pretty good win. Got a vet here against another vet, but a vet that hasn't reached the top like Pedro Munhoz. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, that Kyler Phillips loss doesn't age too well now after we saw Kyler completely gas out. But I mean, Kyler, when he can keep fights on the feet and doesn't have to use the wrestling and grappling, I mean, he's going to land a volume like that. He is a slick striker. Pedro, I mean, actually, I'm going to start with Eamon. I mean, looking at his record, it's kind of surprising the guy's on a 4-fight win streak. Like you mentioned, the last fight he had was a massive underdog, one of the biggest underdog cashes of the entire year. Was able to just kind of march forward, landed more volume, landed the bigger shots as well. And I mean, I could definitely see him doing that here. I don't think he's going to have the volume advantage, though, just because Pedro's constantly kicking the leg kind of slows guys down, kind of makes him a little hesitant to just go in there and throw 3 and 4 punch combinations. I think he's going to have to do that to keep this fight with Zahabi pretty close. I mean, he is going to throw more volume in general, but he also gets hit more. And Zahabi does hit decently hard. We've seen him land some knockouts before. We've seen him, drop guys as well. Yeah, man, if Zahabi was like the younger fighter and I knew he was going to, if he had a little less miles, I guess, on his tank, I'd be more inclined to play this one. I'm just not too invested in either guy, to be honest. I think the volume's with Pedro. I think the power's with Zahabi. Pedro's never been knocked out. Pedro's hard to be taken down as well. I don't think you're going to see much grappling in this matchup. Both have good takedown defense. I mean, you're going to go with the Canadian in a close fight in Zahabi, maybe. It's just tough, man. There's so many variables in this fight. I'll take Zahabi just for that fact alone. He's going to be in front of the home crowd. It's going to be a close fight. Maybe he's going to land the bigger shots, and that's going to be enough for the judges. But he really does have to watch out for the leg kick, because if Pedro gets that going early and does slow him down, there's going to be it's going to be hard for the judges to kind of swing it for him. Then what do you got?
Yeah, I'll say this because I know a lot of people are going to say the same thing that you did. And I know you're kind of just joking about it, but like Pedro losing to Kyler Phillips, I don't think it's not like the worst thing, because Kyler Phillips is good. But the thing with Kyler Phillips is he likes to use his outside footwork to stay safe and mess with his opponents. And Kyler Phillips at the apex, smaller cage, doesn't really allow that. It's actually his 2 losses in the UFC are at the apex. Every other fight was in a big cage. So I think, when you fight Kyler Phillips in a big cage, he can use his footwork. And that's what he did against Munhoz. You just stay to the outside, chip away at him. So I don't think that loss is bad at all. And this is a big step down. Even Zahabi is not a high volume guy. And I don't really think he has like crazy power. I mean, we all remember the Zahabi versus Tercios fight. Like that fight was awful.
Yeah, true.
Like that wasn't that long ago. It's like 2 years ago. And then he gets a knockout win over Arichi Long, which was crazy. That was the card where all the Canadians won. And then a win over Javid. It looks great. I thought his volume looked better there. I know he has a pretty solid mind for the game, which is a nice advantage, going into a fight, because a lot of times we just see fighters with the worst IQ. So I think Zahabi will probably come in with a solid game plan. But I think Pedro's probably the better fighter overall. I think he throws more, gets hit with more, but he's just going to throw a lot more output out there. Solid takedown defense. I think the leg kicks will be big. And he's super durable. So I'm going to go with Pedro Munhoz for the pick, but I'm not crazy about betting him at, a slight favorite considering the skid that he's been on. And, it's not a ton of momentum coming in here. We'll see. But Pedro Munhoz is going to be my pick, but I'm not super confident on it.
Pedro never even been dropped.
Granted chin, bro. Granted chin.
But we're in the month of people losing the Granite Chin. We just saw Holloway last weekend. I'm just kidding. This is no Ilya Taporia standing across from him.
Imagine Zahabi just sleeps him like he did to Richie Long.
Oh God. No, I mean both guys have a negative striking differential. Both guys get hit with more than they land. Both guys are older. It's just like I said, too many variables for me to be confident.
Not one that I'll be too invested in. Moving on, we got Mike Malott taking on Trevin Giles. Mike Malott has to be the most determined fighter on this card because what he showed last time out in Canada was probably one of the worst thing that could have happened to him. I mean, he was the last hope for Canada on that card. He's winning the fight, and then he just gasses out and gets TKO'd with 15 seconds left to Neil Magny. Terrible look. He's minus 290 now, coming back. I think he was like minus almost 400 against Neil Magny. So now he's dropped a little bit, taking on Trevin Giles, who Trevin Giles has been the guy that will take on anyone and anybody. Like the dude, he's losing fights, right? He's lost 4 out of his last 6. But it's Tadrikas Duplessis, Michael Morales, Gabriel Bonfim, and Carlos Prates. Like he's fighting some really good guys. Those are guys that I think will probably beat Mike Malott too. Plus 215, does that intrigue you at all?
Oh, man. A little bit, just because of what we saw out of Mike the Thought Malott, because in that third round, that hoe was out of there. But I mean, on a real note, like I watched Giles against Prates. I mean, he doubled up Prates in the striking department in that fight. Hit him with some big shots. Looked really, really good, and just got knocked out. Now, if he can have a good 1.5 rounds against Mike Malott, I don't really think Malott's gonna, have this insane cardio all of a sudden where he's landing big knockout shots and late in the second or third round against Giles. I think if Malott's smart, he's going to have to implement the wrestling, try to slow down Giles and bag that first round or second round probably, because Giles is going to be there for all 3. He's got a ton of experience against very high level fighters. The guy's gone in there with Dricus. He's got decent wins. I mean, beating Roman Dolidze. He's seen every style there is to see. So honestly, for the striking, I think his striking is going to be better than Mike Malott, especially early in the fight. But if Mike gets the wrestling going, he could definitely win the first couple. But like if you look at the stats, Giles doesn't even have that bad a takedown defense. He's not the easiest guy to go out there and just bully with the wrestling by any means. The guy will throw up submissions as well. And if Mike is just met with resistance, we see what happens. I mean, Neil Magny, dude, just think about it. Neil Magny, a guy who has gone out there and just been beaten pretty badly in some fights lately. And we saw what happened in his last fight against Morales. The dude got absolutely obliterated in the first round. Ian Gary absolutely obliterated the leg and just completely dominated that fight against him. I don't know. This is a tough one for a minus 290 on Malott. This is another letdown spot. I mean, I forget how big of a favorite he was against Neil Magny, but probably bigger than this.
Yeah, he was like minus 400.
Yeah, and now you're putting him again at minus 290 in his home crowd. That's a little pressure coming off of a massive loss. It was a terrible look that people called him a fraud for. Like maybe he comes out here and just completely gasses trying to finish him early to prove a point. Like there's so many things that could go wrong in this fight for a minus 290 that plus 215 on Giles is kind of interesting.
Yeah, one thing to note is these guys, this is actually a rematch because these guys grappled before in Fury Pro Grappling 6, December 30th of 2022. I went back and watched that. It wasn't really one-way traffic either way. Mike Malott won by a decision. But Trevin Giles held his own. Like he was not really put in any terrible positions. Obviously didn't get submitted, found his way on top a couple times. So I actually think Trevin Giles' grappling is actually pretty solid. And I initially thought that was going to be his biggest weakness here just because we've seen him get submitted 3 times before. And then we've seen him get knocked out a couple times. And I would love Trevin Giles more if he had shown a little bit better durability throughout his career. Usually when he's getting submitted, he's getting cracked before, like he's getting hit with a big shot and falling into a guillotine. And Mike Malott has a nasty guillotine. So I think there's definitely the path there for Mike Malott to crack him with something, jump on the gilly and finish it. But the thing is, I don't think Mike's striking is all that great. Like it looks solid. Like it looks like if you put him on a heavy bag, he would look really nice. But in the fight, he doesn't really have the best head movement. He's been hit and hurt in a lot of fights, especially on the regional scene. He's been hurt a lot there. And Trevin has a solid overall game, solid striker, solid grappling. It's just when he makes the mistake or his chin gives out on him, then it goes bad for him. He's actually 5-0 when it comes to decisions. So if he doesn't get hurt with something, like I think he's going to be winning the fight until he doesn't. But if he doesn't get finished, I think he's probably going to be winning the fight. So maybe Giles by decision is a look, or maybe sprinkle on a round 3. Maybe we get a little Neil Magny thing, because Mike Malott does slow down in fights. He's slowed down in fights his entire career. I'm sure after the last fight, he's probably going to be looking at his cardio and making sure everything's good there. So I don't really expect him to gas out as bad as he did against Neil Magny. So, it's either Mike Malott inside the distance round 1 or 2, or it's Trevin Giles by finish to me. I'm going to take Mike Malott for the pick just because I think there's a lot of motivation going into this fight. I do think he'll probably come in here and pick up a win, but I really wouldn't be laying minus 300 until we see something from Mike Malott to show us otherwise. And just because Trevin Giles is pretty game. So Mike's the pick, but buyer beware.
Yeah.
And remember that Giles decision. We'll see what that number is.
Yeah. Yeah. I watch like Malott. Yeah, he gets a lot of finishes, and I'll look at Mickey Gall, for instance. For round 1 knockout from Malott. But watch him after when he raises his hand when he got the fight finished. This dude's face was busted up.
Mm-hmm.
Blood everywhere out the nose. Like, this guy gets hit a lot. And Giles is a slick boxer too. So yeah, it's an interesting one. This could be a crash and burn or Mike Malott redemption.
Yeah. It's either going to look really good for Malott or it's going to look pretty bad.
Yeah.
Moving on. We got another Canadian, Marc-Andre Barriault, coming in at minus 225, taking on Dustin Stoltzfus plus 172. The Canadian coming in here after the loss to Chris Curtis back on UFC 297 in Canada. Then he fights Joe Pyfer and gets starched in round 1. I kind of saw that one coming, because what happens with Joe Pyfer? He knocks dudes out early on in the fight. And what happens with Barriault? He gets knocked out early. If he's going to lose, he usually gets knocked out early, or he's going to go to a close decision where it could go either way. And Joe Pyfer ain't going to go to a decision where it goes either way. Dustin Stoltzfus not had the best run in the UFC. He's coming off a knockout loss to Bruno Ferreira. He's now 2-5 in the UFC, wins over Punahele Soriano and Dwight Grant. This is one where it seems like Barriault's probably going to take over late like he normally does, because I don't really see Stoltzfus cracking him with anything too early. But we know, I don't think Stoltzfus is like some bum. Like he hasn't had a great run in the UFC, but his striking's okay. His wrestling is solid. I think his ground game is solid. I don't know if I would get there like at my plus 172, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Like if Stoltzfus was plus 250, I'd be all over him. Like, that's the range I think that, I would take him, just because he's always like, there's every now and then he'll pull a win out of his hat. And it kind of looked like he was going to do that against Bruno Ferreira in his last fight. Like, he had some really good moments. Bruno was slowing down, and they just ate the elbows from hell. Barriault, this is the type of style that I think is tough for Stoltzfus, because for Stoltzfus, I think if he can just dog out the first round, then he gives himself a chance against these guys to get tired, because he's a dog. He'll fight till the wheels fall off, and he'll do it, for as long as it takes. Whereas Marc-Andre Barriault kind of settles into fights, ups the volume as the fight goes on. It's hard to, if you're not Joe Pyfer, he's hard to finish. He's very durable, and it's not like Stoltzfus has like insane power or anything. I think where Stoltzfus would have to win this fight would be just taking him down and trying to wear on him that way and win minutes. But again, Marc-Andre is so durable most of the time and has the ability to fight for 15 minutes. I just think it makes it super hard for Dustin to win this fight, at least as a plus 175. favorite. Yeah, that's just the thing that's holding me off of it, to be honest. Like, I don't think Andre Barriault is as good as, I guess, as he once was. Like, I think he has shown signs where he's way more hittable at this stage in his career. Obviously took a massive, massive shot from Joe Pyfer. Maybe the chin's starting to go a little bit more as well. I just don't know if Dustin's the guy that's going to stand there and crack it as well. So I think the path to victory for Stoltzfus is a tough one against a big, strong guy like Marc-Andre Barriault here. So I'm going to take Marc-Andre to win. Won't be surprised if Stoltzfus pulls it out, but the price just isn't big enough for me to take a dog shot here.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me because I can't really rate any of their wins. Like all their wins, I think, are just so low level. Like for Barriault, it's a Zaitar, Longiambula, Jordan Wright, Julian Marquez, Eric Anders, and then Stoltzfus. It's Dwight Grant and Punahele Soriano. Like I just don't think any of those guys are very good. So then they match up, and I'm like, well, I think Barriault probably wins because he's got the better cardio. I think his stand-up is a little bit better. We know he's tough. We know he'll push a pace. But Stoltzfus, I think if he can mix in some takedowns early and not allow Barriault to get into a rhythm on the feet, then I think he's live. But if he gets caught in just a straight kickboxing match, I think he's going to get worn down, and I think he'll probably slow down, and Barriault will take over and get his hand raised. Plus, he's Canadian. Might have a score. I mean, realistically, it was a split decision with Chris Curtis, and I thought Chris Curtis probably won that fight pretty clearly. So home cooking could be there for Barriault.
I think Stoltzfus money line's honestly the submission.
Yeah,
probably not going to beat him on the cards. Probably not going to knock him out. And if you take him down, you got to take advantage of it because I don't think he's going to hold him down either.
Yeah, you're right. All right, moving on. We got some light heavyweights here. We got Kyle Machado taking on minus 164. And Brenson Ribeiro is sitting at plus 128. So Kyle Machado moving down to 205. I checked out his Instagram. The dude looks to be in some great shape. Him at heavyweight, he was a little bit pudgy. I think he definitely could have made 205 if he wanted to. He says, yes, I want to. I like to see that. I like to see some effort. I don't know if it's the best move, though, to be honest, because I think the heavyweight division is pretty bad. I think he could have won some matchups. He went to a close fight with Mick Parkin, was it? And then another close fight against Don'Tale Mayes. And I don't know that he's going to win like a lot of fights at light heavyweight. Not that light heavyweight is super deep, but I think the skill gap is pretty wide compared to the heavyweight division. Either way, Ribeiro not had a good run in the UFC, 0-2, and one knockout loss. The guy is dangerous. He's long. He's powerful, but he's also he can get cracked. He can get submitted, and Machado will probably be looking to do that early on here. He is the honorary Canadian here, Brazilian, but he's made his regional career in Canada. Who do you like on this one?
Yeah, I tend to lean with Machado here just because he's proved to be way more durable than Brinson. I mean, Brinson showed some good moments in his last fight against Magomed Gajiasulov. Chewed up the leg in that first round. I mean, Gajiasulov was like buckling every time he tried to take a step. Like it was looking bad. Then he just got taken down and grinded out the rest of the fight. I think Kyle just has a couple of options here. I mean, Kyle's shown that on the mat. I don't know if he's a black belt or not, but I mean, he, at least in the past on the regional scene, like the guy will go for submissions. The guy looks pretty knowledgeable down there. But I think even on the feet, I think he's durable. He's been hit by these heavyweights. You know, Mick Parkin and Don'Tale Mayes aren't the big one-punch knockout power guys, but they're heavy-handed. Like they're heavyweights at the end of the day. Yeah. Now you're taking shots from a guy who weighs 65 pounds less, 60 pounds less. I think he'll be able to eat the shots. And even as a heavyweight, I think he's got better cardio than Ribeiro. I think Ribeiro is one round and he's gassed. I think Kyle hits decently hard, and now he's going to get a weight class down against these guys who aren't used to taking shots from heavyweights. I don't know if he's going to be fast enough to catch him often or what, but I think as the fight goes on, if Kyle can just kind of wear on him a little bit, drag him into the second, I think he'll have more success in the first round.
Let me ask you this. Who's Kyle Machado's best win?
Mick Parkin. They didn't give it to him, but I mean, yeah,
Exactly.
the guy hasn't fought anybody, or at least hasn't beat anybody, especially before the UFC.
You remember his Contender Series fight against
Against
Kevin
Saflarski.
Saflarski?
Yeah, who
So
was like had a little hype.
yeah, he did have some hype. And he hasn't fought since. I think that guy was like a Romanov. Like he just didn't give a shit. Yeah, I don't know, man. Like his best win is Kevin Zaflarski, who did nothing in that fight. Like I gotta look at these stats real quick, just to make sure I get this right. Zaflarski threw 60 significant strikes throughout 15 minutes. 60. Machado threw 173. And there wasn't even like ground control in there. Like it wasn't like he was on his back. Like he just didn't fight. And then he goes in the UFC, he loses twice. So now all of a sudden the answer is that he's got to move down to 205.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like, yeah, you could make 205, but I don't think it's gonna go well for him. Like, I think Brennison Barriault is probably gonna be a lot faster.
way faster.
I know he's not shown the greatest durability, but we know the danger is there with Ribeiro. Like the dude knocked out Bruno Lopes. Bruno Lopes was undefeated at the time. That's a nice best win to throw out there. And I don't think Machado really hits that hard. I don't think his striking is that good. I think Ribeiro striking is better. I think Barriault's ground game is better. It's just if he makes a mistake, sure he could get finished. But honestly, as the underdog, I'm willing to take him as the pick because I think he's going to be a lot faster. I think the leg kicks will be there. And he's a big dude. I mean, 6'3", 81-inch reach. He's not going to be undersized compared to Machado. So give me Brennison Barriault for the pick.
Yeah, and honestly, like size-wise, now that you say all that, size-wise, it's not like Barriault's much shorter than him. I think an inch shorter, and Barriault's actually got a reach advantage.
More professional MMA experience. Unless, Machado was a Canadian regional scene guy. Like they suck. They suck on the Canadian regional scene, especially at heavyweight. So, yeah, I got to go with Ribeiro. Moving on to some more, or not more heavyweights, but here's a heavyweight. Derek Lewis taking on Jonathan Diniz. Diniz comes in as the favorite. Lewis, the Black Beast, is once again the underdog, sitting at 39 years of age. He's looking to pull off an upset again with a big bomb against the undefeated Diniz. I mean, I think this is a great matchup. I think they had Lewis versus Romanov scheduled before, and then they like what they see from Diniz, and they want to get him in there with a top guy. I can't knock him for it by any means. I think this is a much better matchup and one that the fans will appreciate a lot more. Who you got?
Oh, yeah. I think, honestly, at this point in Derek Lewis's career, he's towards the end. He's not making title runs, but he's a big name with a ton of knockouts on his record against big names. I think they like what they see in Janata. I think they want him to advance, and what better way to do it up the rankings than beating a Derek Lewis? Like, I think that's probably the UFC's hope in the back of their mind. And honestly, style-wise, I think he's got the style to do it. Derek Lewis can go out there and knock out these guys who want to take him down, but he gets back up and they get tired and he can land a big knockout shot, or guys he can catch coming in for the shots like Curtis Blades. But against good strikers, Derek Lewis can struggle at times. He's not high volume at all. This guy kind of just loads up and waits for one shot at a time. And if he doesn't get it, he starts to get a little tired. Diniz is a talented striker and kickboxer for the heavyweight division. The guy just showed in his last fight, if he doesn't have a guy trying to take him down or put him against the cage, his cardio is not really that much of a question. Like if this guy can implement his game from the outside, mix in the leg kicks, and get the striking going without taking crazy damage, this guy could fight for 15 minutes, no doubt. I don't think Derek Lewis has the volume to keep up with him. If Derek Lewis knocks him out, like definitely could happen. We've seen it happen so many times. That's probably his path to victory. If not, I think he's going to get picked apart or he's going to get knocked out himself. I think talent-wise, Diniz is a much better striker all in all. Maybe doesn't have the big power like Derek Lewis, but he's still got some power. So, yeah, I think Derek's got to find the big one-shot knockout probably early in the fight, or Diniz is kind of style on him.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Diniz He's going to be a lot faster. I think he obviously has more to fight for at this point. He's got a career ahead of him. Derek Lewis doesn't. Derek Lewis probably gets paid a lot of money nowadays. And yeah, I don't know. I think if he does get cracked with something, he'll take the door if it's there for him. Obviously, he could land a big overhand right, maybe a little flying knee. You never know what you're going to get. But I do think Jonathan Diniz probably chips away at the leg, finds a nice little left hook. He's got a nasty left hook, too. He's kind of like a mini Pereira because he's a kickboxing base. And he showed against Carl Williams, you can go 3 rounds. You can do it that way. And honestly, Carl Williams has a crazy good chin. Crazy good chin. Like a lot of those shots that he was landing on Carl Williams, I thought Carl Williams' head was going to fly off, but he just ate him. And Carl Williams, for some reason, chose not to grapple in that fight. That was just stupid. But we know Derek Lewis ain't going to be shooting takedowns. So it's probably going to be a kickboxing fight. And I think Diniz is the younger, faster, more durable guy with a lot more to fight for at this point. I'm going to take Jonathan Diniz for the pick. Moving on, we got Aaron Blanchfield and Rose Namajunas in the 5-round co-main event. I think this was originally scheduled to be the main event. Thank God it wasn't. But either way, we get 5 rounds of women's MMA action. Blanchfield coming in as the favorite, very slight favorite. Rose comes in as the slight underdog. Blanchfield, 7 years younger, coming off the loss to Manon Fiorot, who, if you watch the double leg breakdown on that fight, we called that fight pretty much to a T. I watched it back today just to check it out. And Rose Namajunas coming off back-to-back wins against Ribas and Tracy Cortez. Interesting matchup. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm not a big Aaron Blanchfield guy, and my opinion's already out there publicly on this fight. I took Rose Namajunas at plus money. I thought she would actually kind of flip to the favorite, but it looks like she's getting to be more and more of a dog, which is surprising to me. Look, the level of competition these two have been fighting are on different levels. Like, yeah, Aaron Blanchfield just fought Manon Fiorot and Talia Santos, but Rose has been doing this for a long time. Ribas, Fiorot, Esparza, Weili, Andrade, Young Jacek. Like, these are names that have been a staple in this division for a long, long time. And, Rose is well-rounded. Her takedown defense, maybe not the best at times, but I think there's a big misunderstanding between how good Aaron Blanchfield's wrestling actually is. I think people think she's a dominant wrestler. She's going to go out there and dump every girl on her back and then get the submission. Her ground game and her submission game is definitely good. Her wrestling, what is she, like 0 for 20 in her last 2 fights? I know it's at least 0 for 15 because she went 0 for 11 against Talia Santos, I believe. So yeah, I don't think her wrestling is dominant enough to where she's going to be able to get to a Rose Namajunas over and over the course of 25 minutes. And if she can't, man, she's kind of just a sitting duck against a girl as skilled on the feet as Rose. I don't think Aaron Blanchfield's striking is good whatsoever. I mean, she's got a little bit of pop in her hand. She throws some decent kicks to the body. But when you're fighting a girl with the movement and the jab of a Rose Namajunas, it's going to make it really hard. We just saw it in Aaron's last fight against Fiorot. Yeah, and even if it does go to the ground, I mean, Rose is good at scrambling. I was watching today against Ribas. Ribas would get in on a takedown, and then right when it would hit the mat, Rose would be rolling and then end up on top. Like, she'd hit a reversal. She'd work back to her feet. She's just wiry and scrambling on the ground. And if you make a mistake and Rose gets your back, like, she's good with the jiu-jitsu herself. So on the ground, I think it's somewhat of a wash. I think Blanchfield might hold a slight advantage. But on the feet, I think the gap is super wide as far as the skills goes. And I do think people forget, too, that Rose doesn't look like a killer in there. She's not, jacked to all hell or anything, but she holds a lot of power in her technique. I mean, drops Tracy Cortez bad in that first round with a nasty shot. Who else? I mean, Zhang Weili knocked out in that fight, knocked out Joanna Jędrzejczyk, or TKO technically, I think, but Joanna was tapping to the strikes, man. She hits hard. So knockouts on the table for me as well. I'm going to take Rose Namajunas. Dog money. It's exactly when I like to take Rose. So, yeah, I think she wins the fight, man.
Yeah, I think Rose wins the fight as well. I think I don't rate Blanchfield highly very, very much, not as much as a lot of people. And in the last breakdown we had with her fight, we kind of agreed, she was a minus 200 favorite, and we kind of chalked that up to just the hype around her because there was no way that she was going to have success against Fiorot. Fiorot was super big, great takedown defense, solid movement on the feet, and just levels above the striking department. And I think we kind of get a similar matchup here with Rose. I think she's got solid enough takedown defense, solid enough ground game to deal with Erin Blanchfield. I don't think Blanchfield has the best wrestling. I think once she gets fights to the ground, I think then she's a little bit more effective. But she just struggles to get it there on the feet. She's not a good striker at all. Like, she doesn't possess any type of power. She just throws arm punches. She throws little leg kicks, little kicks out there that really aren't meant to do anything. Like, I just look at her striking. I'm like, none of this is really meant to do anything other than just to throw it out there. She doesn't set anything up. She's just kind of throwing blind volume out there. And it works at times because she's super tough. She's durable. She's young. Kind of expect that. And in women's MMA, you can kind of get away with that. But when you go up against a girl that knows how to strike, knows how to set up stuff, then it doesn't go well because they can use their movement. They can stick and move and hit you in spots when you're throwing that blind volume. And I think that's what Fiorot did. And that's what I think Rose Namajunas is going to do here. I think she'll probably school her on the feet and stuff the takedowns. The only thing that's really holding me back is, like, Rose was an ex-strawweight, but even at 125, she's looked pretty filled out. She's the fourth time that she's fighting at flyweight. Even against Fiorot didn't really impose her will like she did against Blanchfield, just with her physicality. So I think Rose will be able to hold her own in that department. And then on the feet, she's levels above striking wise. And we've seen her do it for 5 rounds before. Blanchfield was in the 5-round fight with Fiorot, but she didn't slow down, but she didn't really have any success ever. So, I don't really think she's just going to take over late against Rose. If anything, Rose will probably take over. I mean, she's fought Zhang Weili in a 5-rounder and won the 5th round. So, yeah, I like Rose. I like Rose this week, and especially as the underdog. It's again where I'm just like, how is Blanchfield the favorite? Like, I when I did my line on this fight, I thought Rose was going to be like minus 200. And then I look and see she's plus 110, plus 120. I'm like, what am I missing here? So, yeah, I got to go with Rose. To the main event, we got Brandon Moreno taking on Amir Albazi. Albazi comes in as the slight underdog, taking on Brandon Moreno at minus 165. This is a fight where I don't really care. I just don't really care because I don't think, realistically, I don't think Albazi deserves to be in this position. I don't think he won the fight against Kai Kara France. Brandon Moreno looked awful his last fight. Looked like he had no idea how to win a fight. I don't know if the elevation got to him, but the dude just didn't have any type of urgency in that fight. So honestly, I'm off both guys, but it's a matchup, and we'll still break it down. But I want to hear your breakdown for it because honestly, I just don't like the fight. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Brandon Moreno is just getting like tired or something. Just like he's had so many fights in such a little time, like since 20 in big fights too. Since 2020, he's had 6 title fights, and that was between then and July of 2023 when he fought Pantoja at UFC 290, which we were there. Like he looked good in the fight. He landed more significant strikes, but he got taken down 6 times, controlled a little bit. Pantoja just does what he usually does and won 49-46, I think, on 2 of the judges' scorecards. He's fought in Figueiredo a couple times, taken some damage. Kai Kara France. The guy's been in there with some big hitters, with some guys that make it an all-out war for 5 rounds. And then he met Royval, who was just able to keep that same pace as him and was able to just do it longer. Like, Moreno honestly looked like he slowed down for the first time really in his career in that fight. And I just think he's just been in all these wars, so many fights in a row, 5-round fights at that. And now you're getting a guy in Albazi who's got title aspirations. I mean, I'm sure Moreno has the same goal in mind. Let's get back to the title shot and stuff. But now you're in front of a guy who, unbeaten in the UFC, is well-rounded, has some power in his hands, probably going to be able to take Moreno down a couple of times in this fight. And the big question for me is just if Albazi can hold him down or not. Albazi didn't have much success against Kai Kara France. He landed some almost takedowns, and then landed one officially. Just wasn't able to really control him for that long. Yeah, on the feet, I think Moreno's going to land more volume through the first 3 rounds at least. I think Albazi is going to be the one that's threatening maybe with the knockout just from the big right hand he's got. And then if Albazi puts him against the cage and lands a few takedowns, I think he can win rounds here. So it makes it super, super even for me. It's tough to predict. I just really don't know what Brandon Moreno we're getting anymore at this point. I mean, the last performance against Royval, even though Royval is a killer and throws a ton of volume, it was just a little surprising to see like how tired he looked and how like reluctant he was to really go out there and trade anymore once the 3rd and 4th round came. So yeah, I don't know. I think that makes it an even fight here. I'll take, give me Albazi, honestly. Younger fighter, up and coming, or not younger fighter, younger in their UFC career. He's got more to fight for, in my opinion. Moreno's done it all. Like I said, 6 title fights, 6 5-round title fights in the course of 3 years there just not long ago. And now he's kind of out of the picture trying to work his way back. I just think it's Albazi's time. And the other thing, did you see that picture circulating of what they both look like right now?
Yeah.
Albazi looks like he's been juicing for 2 years, and Moreno looks like he's like been on vacation for 2 years.
Yeah, I don't know what to think of this, honestly. Not confident in either side. I don't think I've never been high on Albazi. Just never really impressed me in any fight. And then like I've met Brandon Moreno a couple times in person. By far the nicest dude I've ever met. Nicest fighter I've probably ever met. So like everybody, not just me, but just to everybody, just seeing how he interacts. So I like Brandon Moreno, but man, I just didn't like what I saw in his last fight. I didn't really like what I saw against Pantoja. Just like not a ton of urgency when later in the fight, when Pantoja's got his back, holding him up against the cage, looking for takedowns. Just not a lot of urgency. Like you could see the way where he's just letting these rounds slip. And I think Albazi could maybe capitalize in those scenarios. But then I look at his last fight. I'm like, the dude landed 43 significant strikes in a 5-round fight. And somehow he won. Like, doesn't make sense at all. And I thought Kai Kara-France clearly won. Then he takes a long time off with the neck injury and everything. I don't know, man. Albazi's not it for me. I'm not crazy about Moreno. I'm going to take Moreno for the pick, but this isn't one that I'm going to be betting on at all. I'll just sit back and enjoy, I guess. I hope it's a good fight, but honestly, I just hate the match. It just doesn't even make any sense,
I wonder what the over is. Let's see.
I think the over 4.5 is like -200 or something.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Too many minutes for a -200 to be in there.
I mean, ever since that 4th Figueiredo fight with Moreno, he's lost 2 in a row. Like fight a guy 4 times. If we get the Moreno that fought Figgy for the 4th time, he wins this fight easily. But is that what we're gonna get? Are we gonna get the guy that looks like he's been on vacation for 4 months?
Yeah, the thing with the wrestling too is like Figueiredo had success getting Moreno down in that first fight, especially. Right in second, I guess he landed a couple takedowns each. Kai Kara-France took him down. Pantoja took him down 6 times. I think Albazi will find it at some point. I don't know.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Those are the picks for UFC Edmonton. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hit the like button for us. Subscribe to the channel. Follow us on Home of Picks on Instagram. If you want all of our bets, jump in the link down below in the Winnable to join the Home of Fight Picks Winnable and get all of our bets for this weekend. Let's have a good week. Other than that, you got anything for the viewers before we hop out of here?
It's a decent fight night card. It's better than an Apex card. Actually, like I was telling you before this, I like some of these lines. At least we're getting closely lined fights. We're not getting a ton of -400 and 500s where you got to pray an underdog hits, So, yeah, take advantage. Doesn't happen often.
True. At HI Picks on the medias for me. Where can they find you?
All social medias at the Parlay MMA.
Till next time, the double leg. Signing out.